diving right in to the deep dive today. We're going to tackle the global water crisis.
Ooh, big one.
It is. It is. And it's, one of those things that feels kind of far away, but actually it's way more connected to all of us than we think.
Right, yeah.
We've been going deep on this really interesting podcast all about it. So today we're sharing what we've learned.
Yeah, and it goes way beyond the headlines you see, I mean, the podcast it really gets into all this nuance about the crisis.
Okay, so before we get too far, let's back up. Like, what actually is the water crisis?
Well, I mean, basically it's when people don't have enough clean water,
Okay.
but it's more than just being thirsty,
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about like people not being able to stay healthy, to grow food.
Right.
I mean, whole communities, right? Families, kids especially.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that leads to like all these other problems too, poor living conditions, all these health issues, makes it hard to have a good economy, even.
And I was surprised to learn that it's not just a problem, in places that we think of as like developing nations. Even in developed countries, some communities have these big water issues too.
Totally. Like think about towns that are running out of groundwater, or they have these old pipes that leak and make the water dirty.
Yeah, that's scary.
Oh, for sure.
So what are like the biggest things that are causing all of this? It just seems like a lot of moving parts.
Well, yeah, it's definitely a lot of things all kind of happening at once.
Right.
But climate change is a huge one.
Of course.
I mean, think about it. Droughts are getting way worse, way more common.
Yeah.
So rivers and lakes are drying up, and those are what people rely on.
And then there's all the pollution too. The podcast talked about how like industrial waste and stuff from farms gets into the water and makes it unsafe.
Oh, yeah, tons of that.
And we hear about all the plastic in the oceans, but I guess there's all this pharmaceutical waste too, like medicine.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Like they're finding traces of medicine in the water, even in some of the water that people drink.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah, and we don't really know the full effects of that yet.
Wow.
Like we're still researching, but some studies are saying even a little bit can really mess with ecosystems
Oh.
and could even be dangerous for people.
So it's not just that we need more water, it's like we need better water too.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you can't forget about just how many people there are now. More people means more water use,
Yeah. It's like all the resources are just stretched too thin.
Uh-huh. And we don't even realize how much water goes into making the stuff we use every day, like our virtual water footprint, they call it.
Oh, right. That's interesting. What's an example of that?
Well, did you know that it takes something like 1,800 gallons of water to make just 1 pound of beef?
Wow. Seriously.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's like all the water for the cows to drink, to grow their food,
Right.
to process the meat, all of that.
Wow. The food we eat, like, really matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like just by thinking about what you eat, you can use way less water.
Okay, so we've got climate change and pollution and more people, and we're all just kind of using water without thinking much about it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. It's definitely.
So it's a little overwhelming, but like, what can we actually do about it? What are some of the things people are trying?
Well, that's the exciting part, right? Because there's so much happening, from things people can do at home to like these big technological advances.
Okay, I'm listening.
For example, have you heard of rainwater harvesting?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, you basically just, collect the rain and save it. Works really well in dry places.
That makes sense.
Uh-huh. And then there's those desalination plants.
Oh, right. The ones that like turn ocean water into fresh water?
Yeah, exactly. Those are really promising, especially for coastal cities, but they're still kind of expensive,
Right.
And you have to be careful how you get rid of the salt so it doesn't hurt the ocean.
Gotcha. So not perfect, but still a useful tool.
For sure.
I also heard that some cities are getting really smart about how they use water, like all high tech and everything.
Oh, yeah, like smart cities.
Right, smart cities. What does that actually look like, though?
Well, imagine a city where, like, sensors can detect leaks right away.
No,
So they don't waste water.
That's so smart.
Yeah, they can save millions of gallons that way.
Wow. Where is that happening?
Places like Singapore are already doing it.
Cool.
And there's also this stuff that sounds like it's from the future.
What's that?
They're called atmospheric water generators.
Atmosphere, so like from the air.
Yeah, basically. They can literally pull water out of thin air.
No way. How does that even work?
Well, they use technology to, like, condense the moisture in the air into drinkable water.
That's amazing.
It is, right? And it could be a game changer, especially for those places where there just isn't much water.
Yeah, definitely.
The science is still kind of new, but it has huge potential.
I can't believe it turning air into water. That's incredible.
It is pretty wild. Oh, and there's also nanotechnology, which is playing a big role too.
What's that doing?
Well, scientists are figuring out how to use tiny, tiny particles
Okay.
to, like, filter out the bad stuff in water.
So it's like microscopic water purifiers?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's really cool.
And the best part is they're super efficient and don't cost that much.
Yeah.
So it's great for places where other solutions are too expensive.
It sounds like there are some really exciting breakthroughs happening.
There are. But it's not just about the technology, you know? We also have to just change how we think about water.
What do you mean?
Well, we need to stop wasting so much,
Right.
right? And think more about using it sustainably.
Okay.
It's not just about finding more water. It's about using what we have better.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we all have a part to play in that, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where our deep dive continues. We'll be back to talk about what we can do about all of this.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So we've talked about this global water crisis, all the stuff that causes it, and some of the cool tech coming out to help.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
It is. But, you know, I keep coming back to, like, what can we actually do? It all just feels so big, you know?
Yeah, I get that. It can feel kind of overwhelming, right?
Totally.
But remember, we were talking about, like, ripples.
Right, the ripple effect.
Yeah. Even small things can make a difference.
Okay, so, like, where do we start?
Well, honestly, the best place is just with your own habits, like things you do every day.
Okay, give me an example.
So think about your shower. Could you maybe shorten it by, like, even a minute or two?
I guess so.
Every minute you cut out saves gallons of water.
Okay, that's pretty easy.
And while you're in the bathroom, what about when you brush your teeth?
Oh, yeah, I always leave the water running.
Yeah, a lot of people do. But just turning it off while you brush can save a ton of water. Never thought of that.
Makes a bigger difference than you'd think.
Okay, I can try that. Anything else in the bathroom?
Well, check for leaks. Like, even a little drip from a faucet can waste a lot of water.
Oh, yeah. I have a leaky faucet I've been meaning to fix.
There you go.
Hmm.
It seems small, but those drips add up.
Yeah, true.
It affects your water bill, too, by the way.
Oh, that's good motivation. So what about in the kitchen?
Well, if you wash dishes by hand, are you filling up the sink or just letting the water run?
Oh, I usually just let it run.
Yeah, see, if you use a bowl, you'll use way less.
Okay, good tip.
And if you have a dishwasher, try to only run it when it's full.
I'm usually pretty good about that one already.
Awesome. Oh, and when you're washing fruits and veggies,
Yeah.
do you just, like, rinse them under the faucet?
Yeah. What else would I do?
Try using a bowl. You use way less water that way. And you can even use that water for your plants afterwards.
Oh, that's smart. Like recycling the water?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've done bathroom, kitchen. What about like the yard? Because that uses a lot of water too, especially in the summer.
Oh, for sure. Well, think about what you're planting.
Okay.
If you choose plants that don't need as much water, you can save a lot.
Oh, like drought-tolerant plants?
Exactly. And when you do water deeply, but less often.
I've heard that, but why does that matter?
It actually helps the roots grow deeper,
Oh, interesting.
so they don't need to be watered as much.
Huh, makes sense. What about the lawn?
You know, if it's really dry, it's okay to let it go dormant for a while.
Like let it turn brown.
Yeah, it'll come back when it rains again.
Okay, good to know. So we've got the house covered. What about like our clothes?
Oh yeah, clothes use a ton of water too. Like, the fashion industry is one of the biggest water users.
Really? I never thought of that.
Think about it. It takes water to grow the cotton, to make the fabric, to dye it.
Right, right. So what can we do about that?
Well, first, try to buy less stuff.
Easier said than done?
I know, right? But you really need all those new clothes.
Probably not.
And when you do buy something, get something good quality that will last a long time.
So less fast fashion.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some brands that are, like, trying to be more sustainable too.
Oh, like what?
You know, brands that use less water are better for the environment.
So I should look for that.
Yeah, it's worth supporting those companies. Oh, and speaking of what we buy, what about food?
Right, right. I know that some foods need more water to grow than others, but it's hard to keep track,
It can be. But, like, generally meat uses a lot of water.
especially beef, right?
Yeah, beef is a big one. So maybe try eating less meat, you know, like even just once or twice a week.
Okay, I can try that.
Things like beans and lentils are good alternatives.
Yeah, good point. Any other food tips?
Well, try to buy local food when you can,
Okay.
because food that has to travel a long way uses more water and energy.
Ah, that makes sense. Oh, and wasting less food too.
Oh, for sure. When we throw food away, we're wasting all the water it took to grow it.
Good point. So being more mindful about what we buy and how much we use.
Exactly. Oh, and if you're a coffee drinker,
Oh, I can.
well, coffee uses a lot of water too.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah. So, maybe don't drink 10 cups a day or anything.
All right, all right. Moderation. Moderation.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about a bunch of things you can do at home, but what about getting others involved?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, how do we go beyond just ourselves?
That's where we'll pick up next time on the deep dive.
Okay, back again for the deep dive. We've talked about all the things we can do to save water.
Right, those individual actions.
Yeah, exactly. But now I want to zoom out a bit. Like, how do we take it to the next level? How do we get other people involved, like in our communities and stuff?
Well, I think one of the first places to start is like at work, right?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Because a lot of water gets used in offices and businesses and all that.
So how do we, like, make our workplaces more water conscious?
Well, sometimes it just starts with raising awareness. Like imagine putting up posters in the break room with those water-saving tips we talked about.
Oh, yeah, like reminding people to take shorter showers, turn off the tap, all
Yeah,
this.
it just gets people thinking about it more.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess we could also, like, actually change things in the workplace, not just put up posters.
Oh, for sure. Like what if offices switched to those low-flow toilets and faucets?
Right, the ones that use less water.
Yeah, and they could use those water-efficient appliances in the kitchen too.
Yeah. Oh, and what about the landscaping around the building?
Oh, totally. They could use plants that don't need as much water.
Yeah, those drought-tolerant ones we talked about.
Exactly. It's like giving the whole workplace a water-saving makeover.
I like it. And I bet it saves money, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Lower water bills are good for everyone.
Good point. Okay, so that's at work, but what about our communities? How can we get involved in, like, bigger efforts?
Well, remember all those organizations we talked about that are working on water issues?
Yeah.
A lot of them have local chapters or groups that are doing stuff right in your neighborhood.
Oh, like what kind of stuff?
Well, they might organize river cleanups
Mm-hmm.
or advocate for better water policies or even work to restore wetlands and stuff.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
And volunteering with those groups, it's a great way to actually, like, get your hands dirty and make a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, I bet it feels good to be part of something like that.
It does. And even if you can't volunteer, you can still help.
Like how?
You can donate money, even a small amount, or just tell people about the organization and what they're doing.
Right, spread the word.
Exactly.
Okay, so volunteering, donating, spreading awareness. I feel like I'm getting a much better sense of how to actually get involved.
That's great because, every little bit helps.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that.
We all have a role to play in this.
Totally. And speaking of roles, we can't forget about, like, the government, because they have a big part in this too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, we need good policies to help protect our water.
Like, what kind of policies?
Well, we need rules to stop pollution,
Yeah, makes sense.
like rules for factories so they don't dump waste into rivers.
Right, and for farms too, right? So all that fertilizer and stuff doesn't run off into the water.
Exactly. And don't forget about those medicines we talked
Oh,
about.
yeah, the pharmaceutical waste?
Yeah, that needs to be regulated too.
It's better to prevent the problem in the first place than to try to clean it up later.
Exactly. And we also need policies that encourage people to save water.
How do you do that?
Well, they could give people money back for installing those low-flow toilets and shower heads.
Oh, like a rebate?
Yeah, or they could charge more for water if you use a lot,
Oh, interesting. So you'd be more motivated to save.
right? And it's also really important to make sure everyone has access to clean water.
Oh, yeah. That's a big issue, isn't it?
Yeah, water is a basic human right, so everyone should be able to get it no matter where they live or how much money they make.
Okay, so those are some good examples of policies. But how do we, like, influence the government? How do we get them to actually do these things?
Well, first you got to educate yourself.
Like, learn about the issues.
Yeah, find out what's happening in your area, what policies are being talked about.
Okay, so do my research, then what?
Then you got to speak up.
Like how?
You can call your representatives, write letters, go to town hall meetings, all that.
So basically, let them know that we care about this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because if enough people speak up, they have to listen.
Right. There's power in numbers. And we can also support those organizations that are fighting for better water policies.
Absolutely. So it's like we need to act on all these different levels at home, in our communities, and with our government.
Yeah, it really takes a village or like a whole world to tackle this.
It does. But you know what I find really exciting is there's so much innovation happening right now around water.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
Well, we already talked about those atmospheric water generators and the nanotechnology. But there's other cool stuff too. Like, have you heard of biomimicry?
No. What's that?
It's basically when scientists look to nature for inspiration.
Oh, interesting.
Like there's this beetle in the desert that can collect water from fog.
Really?
Yeah, and scientists are studying it to see if they can, like, copy that and make materials that can pull water from the air.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, nature's pretty amazing. And then there's also these decentralized wastewater treatment systems.
Decentralized. What does that mean?
Well, instead of having one big treatment plant for a whole city, they have smaller ones spread out.
Oh, interesting. Why is that better?
Well, it uses less energy, and it's better for the environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
And some of these systems are so good that they can actually clean the water enough to use it again.
Really? Like, even for drinking?
Yeah, in some
Yeah.
cases. It's pretty incredible.
So it's like a totally closed loop. The water just gets used over and over.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And I bet there's a lot happening in agriculture too, right? Because farms use so much water.
Oh, yeah, tons of innovation there. Like, there's something called precision irrigation.
Precision irrigation.
Yeah, they use sensors to make sure each plant gets exactly the right amount of water.
Oh, wow. So they're not wasting any.
Right. And then there's vertical farming, where they grow food indoors in, like, stacks.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And that uses way less water and land than traditional farming.
Okay, so it sounds like there are a lot of really promising solutions out there.
There are. And I think it's important to remember that even though this water crisis is serious, it's not hopeless.
Right. It feels like we have the tools and the knowledge to make things better.
Exactly. We just need to keep working at it on all those different levels we talked about.
So to wrap things up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this whole deep dive?
I think it's that every single person can make a difference.
Yeah, I'm starting to believe that.
Like even small changes in your daily life add up.
Right, like the shorter showers and turning off the tap.
Yeah. Exactly. And if we all do our part, support the right organizations, make our voices heard, we can create a future where everyone has enough clean water.
So let's all do what we can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's stay hopeful. There's a lot to be hopeful for.
I agree. Well, that's it for the deep dive this week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.